Welcome to episode 12 of the DWRDNET Stationery feed. Today I'm glad to welcome Joe from the Gentleman Stationer. Joe, welcome and introduce yourself and just kind of give an overview of who you are and what you do.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here. My name's Joe. I run the stationery website and now store, the Gentleman Stationer, located in Nashville, Tennessee.
No, and that's great. And for those who haven't followed my channel for a while, Joe is now my local store that I go to all the time, and I'm very spoiled by that fact. So I'm glad we finally got a chance to do an interview for this because it is the store I go to the most these days because it's a 10-minute drive down the road. So always a nice perk. So to get us started, I have my kind of standard questions that kind of talk about general stationery preferences. So up first, what do you currently have inked? What have you been writing with lately?
So today I've got my two Pilot Custom 823s. I have a black fine inked up with Anderillium Moray Eel Green and a amber medium ink, which is ground to an architect, inked up with Tom Studio Loch Ness. And otherwise, I've got just a mix of multi-pens, mechanical pencils, and Lamy 2000 rollerball. So
Very
those are
cool.
that is what is in my arsenal today.
Very nice. Now, just kind of a quick follow-up. Do you change which pens you have with you each day, or is it kind of per week, or does it kind of depend?
So, I mean, just because of what I do, I mean, most of my professional life these days during the day either involves writing. I'm an attorney in my day job, or reviewing items or checking things out for the store. I normally have a lot of pens inked up all the time, but what I use, I typically change daily. I'll pick one or two pens, two or three pens, and we'll use those for the day. I don't alternate between more than that.
Okay. So if money was no object and someone would hand you any pen ever created, what would that pen be?
I don't know. I would say probably that red Lamy 2000 that Johnny Ive did for Lamy, I want to say about 10, 15 years ago. I don't know if you ever saw that. I believe it sold at auction for like $15,000. I would say that would be my grail pen.
No, and I've seen reference to that, and I'm kind of surprised, as many people talk about it here and there over the years, that they haven't released it again as some sort of edition, because that's a color that apparently people want. But
yeah, I mean, they probably would have to do some sort of, I think it was a Project Red release, so there was probably some sort of contractual obligation where they can't release it.
Good point. Good point.
But look, they've already done green, they've done navy blue, they've done brown, so you would think that they would do something in the red family at some point.
Maybe they'll do a mustard yellow to match the Antique pens or something like that. That'd be probably well received.
I could be down with.
Yeah. So, what about ink? Do you stick to your known favorites, or obviously with the store you have a lot of ink coming through, different variety? Do you like to experiment and try out the new things that are coming in?
I experiment a little bit, not as much as I used to. I think mostly these days I've got some sort of blue black or dark green black, and then something with red is what I use, because I do a lot of annotation of documents. I do a lot of drafting, and I do need something with a little bit of color, but for the most part, I'm a fan of just solid blue, black, green, black inks.
No, and that's the great thing is there's so many options. Everybody can fine tune to what they need it for. If you're annotating, it makes sense. You probably can't use a lime green from the day job or something like that.
I have, and it draws comments, but what are you going to do?
Yeah. So, that's pens and ink. So the other part of the triangle, paper. What kind of paper do you prefer writing on in general?
Well, in general, if I was able to pick, one paper, I think I wrote about this morning, but if I was able, or yesterday, but I was able to pick, one paper that I could use for anything for the rest of my life, it would be Midori MD Cotton. But unfortunately, I can't do that because they've decided to only make it in blank formats. So, unless I want to use a guide sheet, which I don't really like to do, that's kind of my swatching and doodling around with fountain pen paper. I journal in it a lot too. But for the most part, I'm not I tend to like more absorbent paper. I don't really play a lot with sheeny inks or shaders or shimmer inks. So I like paper that dries quickly because I write a lot and I like to be able to turn the page and use both sides of the page. So, I use a lot of Marimon. I use a lot of Midori paper, and right now I'm just using one of these MD Basics notebooks that I've been working on
No,
past couple
I've
weeks.
become a quick fan of the Marimon. That was a good find. The first one I got actually at your shop right when you were opening, and now I think I've purchased a few more since then because it was new to me, not new to the world, but it's become one of the quick favorites. But a follow up, since you said since MD only comes in blank, what's your ruling of choice for paper?
Dot grid. It's always been. It's really always been dot grid. Although I do like recently have been getting more into narrow ruled line paper, especially if I can find it in a classic legal pad layout with a line down the middle.
Okay. So, and then my favorite question that I've been asking everybody is what is your favorite stationery adjacent item? An example might be a bag, a case, book weight, something like that.
Stationary adjacent item. I would honestly say, and this is at least for the moment unobtainium, but I'm going to show it anyway. It would be my traveler size Roterfaden case that everybody always tries to steal at shows, which have been out of production for a while. It's not really stationary adjacent because it is stationary, but it's my non-pen. That case is my non-pen ink paper kind of favorite item that I have in my collection.
I think that still qualifies as adjacent because it's a cover. It's a bag of sorts, if you loose definition.
And it has, it has a card holder. You can use it as a wallet. It's got a folder to keep. It holds the traveler's folders to keep documents in. I use these more as kind of portfolios than real notebook covers and journal covers.
No, definitely. So now let's get to the important part, the gentleman stationer. I know I've been following for over a decade at this point. So just kind of talk about when you started the gentleman stationer and how you decided, how you got the website started and when was that?
So, I had to kind of go back and write out a timeline because we're going on over, we're over 10 years old this year, last month. We just finished our 11th year. I started the blog, the website in fits and spurts, probably, periodically I was writing. I can't remember whether it was under Gentleman Stationer or whether the site had another name, but I had done some writing on pens and other things, through 2013. Some of it was published, some of it wasn't. It was the same year my daughter was born, a lot of late nights where I was doing stuff to try to stay awake. Both at night and during the day. Did a lot of my writing then. And I want to say that we launched TGS, the website, in April of 2014. And so from, 2014 up until early 2020, it was strictly a review site. And it had some of my personal writing. And, I kind of played around with different formats for it. I did a lot of reviews. I did some longer form pieces on the website. I've dabbled in video over the years. TGS does have a YouTube channel. I've been trying to be a little bit better about doing more video demonstrations and more video related content because a lot of the new stuff that I'm finding with the shop, I find it easier to explain certain things on video as opposed to in writing, even though writing has always kind of been my core focus, and it probably will remain the core focus of the site. For 6 years, from 2014 up till 2020, it was mainly a self-funded, review project. And, it around the same time, I think I technically started, I definitely had the idea to open a small shop attached to the site pre-COVID. But when everything went into lockdown, I had a lot more time at home, was when I started to kind of build out the idea because I just had the time to do it. And through 2020 and 2021, we expanded the shop. And I'd been looking for a way to get away from paid advertising, affiliate linking, just because I hated that part of doing the of maintaining the site and, funding the site, funding all the reviews and funding the hosting and all that. It got expensive. And I had to figure out a way to make the site fund itself and also hopefully, turn it into at least some sort of part-time gig or side hustle that did a little bit more than paid for itself. And I liked the idea of owning a store and, selling some curated products or, collaboration products, because the thing that I didn't like about affiliate linking and advertising, which is how a lot of blogs have to be supported if you're not going to sell stuff directly, is because you send people to third parties who you don't have control over the experience that they have. And you get a lot of people say, "Well, I followed this link from your site. Turned out I didn't have a great experience. Why do you do business with that person?" And you don't have any control over that. Or you have limited, any control you do have is retroactive. And I decided that if I was going to, put pens in people's hands, I wanted to have more say in how that experience unwound, how that experience unfolded for them. And, it made sense to think about opening my own shop. It also helped that there wasn't at that time any, really any store in our area in Nashville, something that I found kind of really disturbing and, really troubling given where we are and how much the city's been growing. And it kind of had one of those "why not me" moments where I know a lot about this stuff, I really enjoy it, and I've got the connections to get a hold of stuff and be in a position to be able to bring that sort of store to Nashville. I started it out online only, simply because, at the time we launched the shop, not much was happening real estate wise. But after about, 2 or 3 years of fairly steady growth that also involved, getting more involved in our local pen club as things reopen. We've got a pretty vibrant pen club in Nashville of people who meet regularly. I started to think that the community would be able to support a physical shop. That process from, kind of realizing that and, the time from realizing that and moving towards actually opening a store took about 2 years. I mean, it was kind of stop and go for a while. I have never done anything in retail. I'm an attorney by trade. I'm a litigator. I don't do anything real estate transactional wise. So this was all a completely new, it's just a completely new experience for me in terms of, figuring out, what kind of lease do I need? Do I need to work with a broker? Eventually I did start working with a broker. Pro tip, that's very, very helpful. It just kind of, it was one of those processes that took much longer than I thought it would, but I'm glad it did, because I don't know that I would have been ready to actually do it if it had happened quickly when I first had the idea.
And that makes perfect sense. That has always been surprising to me when I got into pens. Pretty much the first store I went to was Vanesp, and that was really almost one of the closest stores, and that's a 5-hour drive. This area, we had Pelican hubs, but we didn't have a store and things like that. Nashville has definitely grown since I moved here in '98, to what it is now. It was a breath of fresh air to have a physical store, because you're not wrong. The Pen Club seemed to thrive after, the shutdown couple of years and whatnot. That in-person interaction of people who are probably in general a little bit more naturally introverted, want to spend their time writing and things like that. It's a nice turn of pace. But as you were filling out the shop, one thing I've always appreciated about Gentleman Stationery, the online store, and now the physical shop, is you have a bunch of stuff you don't see at other stores that's not the same things. You have different things like your hourglasses or the adjacent items. And that's, like I said, my favorite question. I like the little desk things, the trays, the stuff like that. So I know you've always written and talked about a curated shopping experience. So was that part of the initial vision, to be that more curated, having stuff that differentiates you from other retailers?
Well, some of this is, I think there's a couple different answers to that question. Some of it's personal, just my personal interest. Like, I've always had a fixation with libraries and studies, and, building out, I've always had a home office. My office at home doesn't look anything like the utilitarian back office of the shop layout. But, I've got nice bookcases. I've got a desk. I've got some antique stuff. And I've always really liked kind of the old style wood paneled study with the hourglasses, desk accessories, just as a matter of a personal aesthetic. And so, to the extent I was going to build a shop, I definitely wanted there to be that part of me in it. Otherwise, I didn't think it would be very fun to build out because you've got to, you can't, this takes a lot of work and you have to enjoy the process in order to see it through because everything's going to take, the one thing I've learned is that everything takes twice as long as you think it's going to. And just the process of going through it and, it takes longer to get inventory. It takes longer to find your sources. It takes longer to find the right products. It takes longer to build a stable customer base. And unless you like the stuff that you're trying to sell, I think it would be very hard for me to do this job. The second part of that is simply practical. There's so much competition online. The pen space, the stationery store space is getting really crowded. You've got to do something to differentiate yourself. And, unless, you build a store that has a specific niche, and if you specialize in a certain thing, it can be hard to differentiate yourself, especially online. And I think you've already talked to, a lot of the people who have been Eric at Amarillo Stationery. I mean, he's done a great job of creating a shop that's, unlike anything else out there. And I think that the people who are going to be successful are the people who are able to do that clearly and give themselves an identity. And that's kind of what I've been trying to do with the stationery adjacent items, because I do like pens, I do like inks, and there's demand for that. So I'm always going to sell it. But I think if I'm going to go to a trade show or a market and, kind of geek out over stuff, I'm probably in the stationery adjacent items the majority of the time.
No, and that kind of carries over. I know you've written in, at Arkansas, your table just was a different shopping experience from most of the others because you had paper, you had Rotorfod, you had Lockbee, you had stuff that was different. So I like that you're able to carry that over into when you vend pin shows because, you walk through, of course, makers, they're going to have pins. But walking up to a table, we're like, oh, wait, there's gel pens, there's pencils, there's other writing implements. And then, of course, Rotorfod, which is unique on its own because you don't really see many people carrying that. Or the Lockbee things, talk about how you chose to do that as well for pin shows, because that does differentiate the shopping experience. At least it did for me.
Well, I think part of it too, though, is I think part of it is simply, for me, a big part of it is making the shows more open and accessible and inviting to a broader group of people other than the people who are just interested in collecting pens. Because I do think that part of what makes this hobby so much fun is the community of people from all different, walks of life and interests, really, that kind of congregate around it. But to extend that to the shows, the in-person meetups from the internet, you've got to create a broader selection to make people want to come to the shows. And I want that to carry over in what I bring to shows. Like I want to bring pencils. If somebody's not a fountain pen enthusiast or a vintage fountain pen enthusiast, I want them to be able to have a show experience and still be able to find something interesting that they can take home at my table. So I'll bring some wood case pencils. I'll bring mechanical pencils. I'll bring pencil sharpeners. I'll bring cases. And I'll bring some fountain pens too. But, I don't go really fountain pen or ink heavy because I know that there's going to be 5 other people at the show that have that there and will be able to, have that for people who are looking for it. I mean, I'm kind of trying to, kind of expand the horizons of what the show experience is.
No, and I think you're succeeding in that 100%. Even I wasn't at Atlanta this year, seeing, walk around from like Mike, Madison, Inkdependence, or Brad talking about picking up Natsu cards and some traveler stuff from your table. It's things like that that are different, but that also, people are associating Gentleman Stationer with the unique products, which is great. With like the Natsu cards, those kind of came out of left field, and I use those. That's how I plan this entire video series. Is I have my box of Natsu, and there's a card for each interview, and a to-do list for each thing. So it's little things like that that definitely are becoming more
Well,
commonplace because you started carrying them or kind of wrote about them, got the word out, and then those of us lucky enough to be local, every time I come in, I just look, okay, what's new? What have I not seen before? I need to go pick
well,
that up and see what's coming home with me today.
and the only way I found that was by spending, 2 hours at midnight on a Saturday, you know, trolling my trolling through all my online wholesaler accounts, and I came across that brand. I mean, it's just kind of the process of diving in on the stationery adjacent stuff and trying a bunch of stuff, half of which might work, half of which doesn't.
So, you do pin now that you have the physical store. I know you've written some posts about you're kind of changing your pin show strategy to not go to as many shows maybe and focus on the store. So, do you have any other shows on your schedule for the rest of this year? Or is it more of a continuing to build out the store and expand and let it kind of grow, and then maybe do a show here or there?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I would love to do shows, but unfortunately, I don't have any full time help at the shop. I mean, my family and I run this more or less on our own. I mean, we do have some people helping us occasionally, but the store requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of attention. So it's more a practical issue of not being able to just close it down and get away for a weekend every month. I am going to go to DC. I'll be set up with Van Ness. We partner with them for shows a fair bit just because we work well together, and we kind of bring complementary stuff to the shows. I'm probably going to be down in the Pen Lounge most of the time, giving some classes on notebook systems like Rotorvaden, Lockbee, some other stuff that I've got in the works. So I'll be doing that. I am thinking about. I am going to go to San Francisco, but I'll drop a spoiler. I have always wanted to do a cross country and back road trip, so I'm thinking about driving out to San Francisco Pen Show, and that'll be my big vacation for August.
That will be quite an experience, I'm sure. Hopefully, it's not like Sean talking about in his interview when he and Lisa drove out last year and got stranded for a couple days in the middle of,
Well,
I think, Arizona or something.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie and deny that a part of it involves being able to drive out and haul back several large Toyota Craft items that could not be packed in a suitcase. That may be playing a more than small role in it.
Hey, you have to take advantage. If you have the car space,
I
you
mean,
have to fill it up. Isn't that the rule?
what's 6,000 miles? What's 6,000 miles? I mean, hey.
So I know that you've done some collaborations in the past. Like, we have a bunch of great local makers, and then other collaborations you've done. Talk about when you decided to do like your first collaboration, or I don't know if it was the first, but one of the earlier ones with like Nick Pasquale, when I think he made nib holders for you, or the Sunderland. So just kind of talk about how you got into the collaboration space, and do you have any current ones and any you can tease that might be on the horizon for the future?
Well, the first collaboration I ever did, which is still one of my favorites, was with Dan at Good Made Better. We did a Penwell, a dark red Penwell, and we did 2 or 3 runs of them, and it was like in a dark ceramic coated Urushi red finish, which was absolutely gorgeous. We may bring it back at some point. It's one of we made a lot of them, and we sold a lot of them over a 2 to 3 year period. So I don't know how much demand is still out there for another one of them. But that was actually my first collaboration. It did really well. It was a stationery adjacent collaboration, which was kind of in line with what I wanted to do. The second one we did was the Sunderland pen. And the Sunderland MK1 is a rollerball that takes, Pilot G2 size or Mont Blanc threaded rollerball refills. It's an incredibly well machined rollerball pen by Sunderland Machine Works in Pennsylvania. Brad Sunderland, I reached out to him. He was willing to do a special run where we could do a matte black finish, black DLC tumbled clip, and a matte red section. So it was in our blog colors. It was that was my favorite collaboration, pen wise, that I've done. I would say between the Penwell and the Sunderland pen, those two have been kind of hard for me to top. And I haven't really found a a third one yet that still kind of fits in with the black and red color scheme. I did do a limited run of majestic fountain pens with Sean Newton in that colorway. We could only really do, I want to say we did about 10 of them. We would like to do more, and Sean and I may try in the future. So that may be our next kind of big pen collaboration. Like you said, Nick Pasquale and I did a collaboration on Kakamori dip nib holders. And most of these are products that I don't think, they're collaborations on products that I don't think get as much mainstream attention as they probably should. I think they're really good. They're really good quality stationery products. And there's a lot of really good quality stationery products out there, which for whatever reason just don't get as much hype or recognition because, they're not out there constantly promoting themselves on social media. They're focused on making good items. And those are the people who I want to boost, who I want to help out, who I want to make sure get some more attention and get more of a spotlight on their products. A lot of those products, like Sunderland, I'm now carrying the regular line in the shop. And I plan to continue carrying the regular line, and we may do another collaboration. Roterfaden is another one of those brands, the binder notebook system company out of Germany. And they've been around for a while. They've definitely had a US retail presence, but they also haven't caught on in the same way as, say, Traveler's Company. Part of that is price point, but at the same time, part of it too is that it's a small batch product that is not going to be made in large quantities. To tease another product that I believe will be coming within the next 2 months. I'm not going to do an official announcement, but
that I'm sure if
and
when that comes to be, tuned. That would if and when that comes to be, if you're not watching the video version, definitely check it out on the YouTube, because Joe did hold something up to the camera that, if you were paying attention earlier, you'll be able to, you'll be able to see what that is and hint. And then I know one of your other ones that you did recently is the purple Heinz pen. Isn't that micarta?
It is. It is micarta, and it's micarta is a material that I've always wanted to do a pen in and to work in. And it's an interesting material. I'm a big fan of micarta. I've liked micarta for a long time, going all the way back to the Twisby micarta pen. And it's basically compressed, cloth that's pressure treated and compressed into a rod or a brick to where you can turn it and, make knife handles out of it. And there's a company called Crazy Fiber that sells it to pen makers where you can turn pens out of it. And Heinz pen had a really kind of wild purple micarta that we've recently released a collaboration pocket fountain pen in their Taschenstift pocket fountain pen line. So please go check that out too. That's a relatively recent release. We just released it in April, and so far it's been doing pretty well.
No, and we'll have a link to that in the video description or the show notes as well. So, because that one's one that I like micarta. I have a couple of knives that have the micarta handles and whatnot, but I'm not in a pocket pen stage yet. So that's one of those that I'm like. But I also, every time I go in, I see the boxes sitting there. I was like, well, realistically, eventually, I'm probably going to pick one up. But, let other people have the opportunity first.
So we did a limited run of that pen. So that pen, what that pen was, is I always, it would be very easy for me to get stuck. I've done a couple pens with Heinz over the years. We did one in a signature acrylic, which was kind of the TGS colors all blended together. But it would be very easy for me to do, red and black pens and just every year release a new red and black TGS pen. I don't really want to do that. I kind of wanted to play around and do something really wild that was almost a little bit out of character. And, kind of a dark purple in a wild, psychedelic pattern with a dark purple anodized section and a lilac nib. I thought it would be fun to do. So we did a limited run of around 20 pens. We've still got about half of them left. I think, they're on the more expensive side because micarta in and of itself is more expensive and difficult to work with. But, we'll have those. We should have those still for a while. And, people come in and everyone, most of them have been sold in the shop. I mean, a lot of people come in and see them and they're like, wow, that looks cool. That's wild. And they'll end up picking one up.
Well, yeah, and that seems like one of those, micarta, I know from taking pictures of knives in the past, it doesn't photograph the same as seeing it in person. It's one of those weird, because of when they stabilize the fabric, it looks better in person almost every single time. Though it doesn't photograph the same for some reason.
Well, and it changes too over time. I mean, like the ink, you'll get ink on it. It will wear down. The finish will patina. Um, and it changes. It's one of those materials that kind of changes with you as you use the pen, which is why I like it. I've got 3 or 4 micarta pens now, and they're all favorites.
And so that takes me a little bit in a different direction. You're talking about as what you're carrying, but let's expand a little bit more and talk about the stationery hobby community as a whole. What areas do you see growing? Like, just people walking in. Are people looking now more to they're set on their pens, but they want to explore papers, they want to explore pencils, they want to explore inks? Is there one that's jumping out that you've seen from your online sales and your in person that's kind of leading the pack of people are more apt to want to try new this or new that?
I mean, I don't know that I've necessarily seen people move towards a specific type of product. I think what I've seen is more of a shift in, I don't want to say attitude. People are looking for products that they can use day to day to help them get offline and get off their phones. In terms of people coming in, there's a lot of people who want to start journaling. There's a lot of people who are starting to use a paper planner again. So they're looking for items that sort of complement that new aspect of their life. I'd like to try a fountain pen, but I need the fountain pen to work with X, Y, or Z. And they'll have that with them. And they can sit down in the shop and look at different pens and pencils, and we can talk through what their specific needs are and hopefully come up with something that they'll enjoy using. But it's less of a focus on, I missed the last 3 TWSBIs. I need to pick up one of each. Which you kind of saw, that's an aspect of pen collecting and people who buy a lot of pens, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm seeing less of that aspect of the hobby, and more of a focus on people who are actually heavy users of the pens and pencils and paper and notebooks.
No, and that makes sense. And along those lines, I'll put a link in the notes to the video you did with like the walkthrough of the store, but pencils, I know that's some of the local people, we're starting to look more on the wood case pencil side because it's different. It's something,
Mm-hmm.
I've got plenty of pens looking at my desk. I can see like 20 sitting here. But the pencils, I have 2 that I got from the patron box. And the wall of pencils is always intriguing. And I like that you have the pencil testing station so you can literally go in and try all these, wooden pencils. Because I think I said when I was doing my video on the patron unboxing, I don't think I had manually sharpened a pencil in probably 15 years. I just hadn't done that because I was always a mechanical pencil user. So talk about the pencils, because that's another thing that I always feel like your store is just different because you promote writing with whatever tool, not just fountain pens. You like your Antique ballpoints. You have some of those different items that are the multi-pens. Once you start using them, you really have an appreciation, because I know this 4-in-1 uni, I use it all the time now, and I would never have thought about getting a multi-pen till reading about it. So talk about some of those other pen and pencil, that you've brought into the store and exposed people to from, to try for the first time.
Well, I mean, I think it kind of goes back to the whole idea of people are looking to kind of use these items to help them, focus. I mean, I think people feel really distracted these days with their phone, having a hard time concentrating, whether it's the phone, whether it's, the news and everything trying to grab your attention 24/7. And, even fountain pens, with a fountain pen, you've got is the nib right? Is the ink right? Is the paper working correctly? There's a lot of, if you try to use a fountain pen for everything, it can be distracting when you're actually trying to get work done as opposed to just playing around and having fun. There's something to be said for, getting a click pen or a multi pen where, okay, I need to go to red instead of black, I'll just twist the pen and write with red ink instead of black ink. Oh, got a mechanical pencil in there too. There's something really nice about having, the one writing instrument that you can use for a full day of work. Same thing with a wood case pencil. If you want to work with a pencil, wood case pencils are high maintenance. You got to sharpen them, but some people like that. I like it because it slows me down. It gives me a chance to stop, reflect, be a little bit more deliberate. I would say that I'm probably still more of a mechanical pencil multi-pen person than a wood case pencil person. I do use a lot of wood case pencils, but if I'm going to take one pen for work to work and carry it all day, it's probably going to be a multi-pen or a click ballpoint like a Jetstream.
No, and that makes sense. But I know that's always fun to discover the antique, inexpensive pen that writes wonderfully, and like the unknown fact that you can change the colors around. I know Lisa Olive Octopus on one of her streams recently was like, hey, look, I made 2 different color pens because you can unscrew this mustard yellow and screw it on with this other, or like the one you did with the TGS colors and the patron box, things like that just add that little bit of visual distinction that set them apart.
And I think that's another aspect of it too, is like you can have a lot of fun in this hobby for not a lot of money. I mean, there's a lot of the expensive stuff gets all the attention, but there's a lot of really good products out there that don't cost very much money at all. And I think that given, you've been hearing a lot. I mean, everybody's been hearing a lot in the news about tariffs and trade wars, and everything's going to get more expensive and everything's going to get more pricey. Even if you have to end up spending less money on the hobby in the future, you can still have a lot of fun for less than $15. I mean, those, like you said, those antique pens. I mean, I could have a blast creating all sorts of crazy color combinations with those. And I've always liked kind of the office supply end of the market as well. In addition to kind of the fine writing segment of stationery. I mean, I like just gel pens and wood case pencils and cheap pencil sharpeners and legal pads and spiral notebooks. I mean, I could have just as much fun in that part of the hobby as I could with the fountain pens and the inks.
No, and that makes sense because that's how most of us got started. I know for me, when I was a kid, I wanted the new pencil or the pencil box or the Precise V5. I went on, I'd buy a pen and I would use that exclusively for 2 weeks until I went to the store again. Oh, that pen looks better. Or your friend would have one oh, I got to get one of those. And you kind of go through those off the shelf pens, but it's very easy to see where that can lead later on, because now look at the hobby and where it's grown of, because that's a common story you hear when people talk about, hey, how'd you get started? Well, I had to have my crayons in a certain way when I was in elementary school, and the Lisa Frank folder or something like that, and it kind of carries on through the rest of your life. Okay, so as we're starting to wrap up, we're getting to the point of the last question that I've been asking everybody. What's next for the Gentleman Stationer, but also, how do you determine what's next? Because you've got the new store, you've been growing in a relatively small amount of time. So just tell us what's next and how you're making those decisions as you advance forward.
Well, I mean, in terms of what's next, I mean, I think we had touched on it earlier where, my goal in the immediate future is to kind of solidify the store here in the community. And that's going to be my priority for the next year, at least. I mean, I originally set out to build a place that our, local community has to gather and to have access to, people who are knowledgeable about, stationery and pens, inks, paper, and a place to actually go and talk about those things. And that's my priority, is to make sure that that's stable, it's viable, and it's able to be here for the long term. Look, there's a lot going on these days. Pricing is going to be a challenge, I think, going forward for stationery stores, especially for those of us who deal with international and imported goods. I mean, it's just a fact, given how things have been for the past 6 months. It's been very hard to predict how that's going to turn out. I think in light of that, we're all going to have to be very cautious in how we grow our businesses to make sure that we're able to stay viable for the long term. in terms of personal interest, I would like to start experimenting with making even some more of my own products. I've got some ideas for some in-house products, maybe some additional collaboration. And in terms of how I decide what to do, I mean, look, the local community in Nashville is great. We've got a great pen club. We bounce stuff off our local customers. We talk to people in the pen group. I talk to a lot of people online. It's just kind of a constant process of exploring, figuring out what people feel is missing from the current stationery community and from the current stationery market, and seeing whether we're in a position to fill that niche. In terms of experimenting, it's a lot of trial and error. Some stuff works, some stuff doesn't. I'm lucky enough to have a Patreon, which isn't huge, but it's full of a lot of people many of whom have supported me going on 3+ years since we've been running it. I kind of use that as my focus groups to test products and to give them first access to new ideas. Like recently, you mentioned earlier, we tested a curated stationery box to see whether or not there would be any demand for another curated box or a subscription service. It did pretty well, and we got some great feedback on stuff like that. So I always I always try to not be afraid to try new things, but to do it in a way that is, sustainable, and to, above all else, my goal is to make sure that TGS is going to be around for the long haul, because I really enjoy it. I mean, it's kind of become part of who I am, and I really want to focus on making sure that, it's actually going to be sustainable over the long term.
No, and that's a great way for us to wrap up. If you've not been to Nashville, definitely put it on your list of places to go. We'll have the link to Joe's store information in the notes and the video description as well. But Joe, thanks for taking some time to talk tonight. I know, it seems odd, but it was harder to schedule with someone local because, with keeping the store going and busy, I'm glad we finally got a chance to, sit down and talk, because obviously I'm a big fan. You're my local store now, and I think my wife and I come in there almost weekly and
every Saturday, like clockwork, Saturday morning, 11 o'clock.
Fun little tidbit: I was actually the first retail customer because we had an online order we could pick up in person. So
it was. I actually had to ring you up outside of the actual system because we couldn't get it working.
Yeah,
I remember that.
So definitely be sure and look up Gentleman Stationer if you're visiting Nashville. And if you're listening to this on audio only, don't forget we are available on Spotify and Apple Podcast. But for most of these, video is going to be your best bet, because as guests are able to hold things up and show things like Joe's sneak preview of a upcoming collaboration that he couldn't really say. Always be sure and check out the video. So once again, thanks for following along on this journey as we talk to small business owners in the stationery community so that they can grow their businesses and more people can find out about these kind of hidden gems. So until next time, thanks for watching.
Thanks for having me on.